Hello everyone and welcome back to Auer Time with Crown College football coach John Auer. Auer Time is a weekly program that gives you, the fans, the opportunity to ask the Crown College coach questions about the Storm, football or sports in general, or just seek his wisdom about life and what's going on out there in the world. This week the coach has an exciting episode in line for us as he discusses last week's game against Minnesota Morris. We learn his insights about what's going to go on this week against Eureka University, and he discusses with us what his favorite Star Wars movie was of all time. So let's get right to Auer Time. So let's welcome back Coach Auer. First of all, Coach, let's begin with team updates and injuries you'd like to talk about.
Well, we have, last week was part of the struggle was losing the quarterback in the first half, and McCormick is going to be able to play this week. He got cleared. He has to go through the concussion protocol, and then he had to go get cleared by a doctor. But T-Bird on defensive end, also got a concussion during the game. He'll be back the following week after it. And so, we have some positive news and some that we're going to have to work with from that standpoint. But other than that, seem to be doing pretty well health-wise. This time of year where you're in week 8, you always have those bumps and bruises that we have. But other than that, we're doing pretty good.
You guys actually had your bye week technically at the end of the season. How does that wind up working out?
Oh, we actually had it. I think it was about 5 years ago, where we had a big snowstorm came in and actually canceled 3 of our games at the end of the year, three conference games. And so as we sat as a conference, we talked about the fact of, we have a lot of kids that play both football and basketball. We have, that time of year as far as weather goes isn't the greatest. And so we just decided as a group to say, let's go, one non-conference at the beginning of the year, the first week, and then the next 9 games are our conference season. And then our bye week would be at the end. And it's been pretty good, especially, our weather-wise, it's been pretty good to finish up the year. We don't have to worry about that anymore from that perspective. So that's kind of where that was created was that 1 year where we had the last game of the year here where it was wet, wintry outside, and we tried to shovel it off, and it just didn't, the perfect time and those type of things. I wish we had, looking back on it, I wish we had been able to do more to get that last game in, but I think this helps us from that regard.
Interesting. Looking back at last week's game, big defensive battle that you wind up going through. Tell us a little bit about how the game looked from your perspective.
Well, I know coming into it, I felt like, and our defense has done a great job the last few weeks of stepping it up, and I thought, from that side of the ball, I thought we could handle them, and which is what we did. And felt like we'd do some more stuff offensively against them. And early on where Brandon got the concussion, he actually got it during the first series. The first series we drove right down and scored on him. A 13-play drive, put it together, had to convert a couple 3rd and 4th downs in order to do that. But felt like, it was still a struggle to get that thing in, but felt like we were heading in the right direction. And you can kind of tell the next couple series that Brandon wasn't his normal self, and had this and that happen, and kind of things that put us behind the chains at a lot of times offensively. And our defense did a great job. There's a couple times where, we had some tough punts and even an interception return back down to our 15-yard line. They pushed them back out to the 40 from that. So I felt like our defense stepped it up and across the board did a good job from that. And we were trying to find out, hey, just one play. Like right before half, we're throwing the end zone and he touches just barely out of bounds from that. If we have that, we're up 14-0. Drive the ball down to the 1. They give Ryan credit for hanging in there. And, that last drive we started at our 3 and we drive it all the way down to their 1 inside of 1 minute from that standpoint was a great test to that from that standpoint. But just, again, the whole day trying to find any way to win and have success, and our defense keeping us in there the whole time and trying to find the spark for us offensively.
Let's talk about that defense for a moment. You hold them to 183 yards of total offense, just 53 yards on the ground. You have to look at that as a big plus.
Yeah, I would say that, and not only that, but again, our defense's ability to, I guess, 3 or 4 situations in our own end where they hung in there and they missed 2 field goals and were able to do those things. And so I think our defense led us as far as our excitement goes and just play from that standpoint. And I know from an offensive perspective, it was trying to press to keep up with the tempo that they had established.
You dominate this game for the most part. Is it kind of hard to swallow that you don't walk away with the win?
That was a tough one, sitting on the bus and looking to see we had 20 first downs to their 10, total yardage. It was 100 over from that standpoint. And that's kind of how they've won games this year. You know, when you take a look at their things, we thought of that early. We thought, how are they beating this team and this team? And we looked on it, it was the same thing. It was the other team out gaining them 100, 200 yards and turning, you know, we had a couple turnovers too, which hurt us from that standpoint. But that's kind of how they're winning games, just kind of grinding it out. And, you know, we talked about it afterwards, is the fact of, you know, ultimately that's what it comes down to. You can have all the yards, you can have all the first downs you want, but if you can't put it in the end zone and if you aren't ahead on the scoreboard, you know, that's where it counts.
It's a tough one. This week you travel to Eureka, Illinois. Eureka also enters the game at 3-4. What do you think are some keys in playing the Daredevils?
Well, like it was, you take a look at the 2 previous weeks, we talked about that offensively. Offensively, didn't turn the ball over, and were able to convert in the points that we needed to from that standpoint. And then defensively, again, being able to hold up in our own end and get off the field on third down. And I felt like we did that well last week, especially defensively from that standpoint, but turning the ball over was a big one for us. And I think coming into this week, I think that's a key, is the fact of, you know, our guys doing their responsibilities, having some success early is a big thing for us. They're going to play press man coverage on defense and throw a bunch of people in the box. And so, you know, we're going to have our receivers and our quarterback make plays from that standpoint, be able to come up with some big plays to get them out of that.
Last season, you played them on the last weekend of the year. You wind up winning behind 5 touchdowns from Matt Michaud and Josh Edlin. Without giving away your game plan, is it safe to say that we're going to see a heavy dose of these two as well?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, and also too, like I said, with the way they play defense, we're going to have to throw the ball too. You know, we're going to have to throw the ball and have some success out there and beat some people man on man, and be able to do that. So I would say it's a little bit different this year. I think they have, you know, they had a lot of young guys, whereas those guys, a lot of guys returning. So I would say this year it's a little bit more. Last year, even though you take a look at scheme-wise, probably shouldn't be able to do this against them, we were able to do them just because we were able to manhandle them up front a little bit. Whereas this year it's going to have to be a better mix between the two.
Anthony Reesnover, I'm hoping I'm saying that correct, is quickly establishing himself as quite a force for them. What do you do to try to stop the freshman back?
Well, I think, you know, they're a ton of inside zone. You know, I mean, on inside zone, you have to be able to hold up your own at the point of attack, and then be able to cut off the cutback lanes and the bounce lanes on the outside. And so I would say from us, it's just, you know, our guys inside being able to hold off the double teams and working their way up, but also being disciplined on the edges and not letting him bounce outside of it.
Let's get to our fan questions this week. Our first one comes from Jacob from Plymouth, who asks, what do you think needs to happen with the football program for you to really move this team to the next level?
It's a great question, and we've talked about that for a long time. And our biggest thing right now is to be able to go too deep across the board. I think our starters, we can compete with anybody, but when we have injury, that hurts us a little bit from that standpoint. And also too, it helps us in competition in practice to be able to say, hey, if you're not doing your job, we get another guy behind you that can do their job. For us, trying to get to that point where we're 44 deep as far as starters on our team. We do, again, we're usually 60, 70 from there as far as numbers go, but trying to establish the self of having again, too deep on each side of the ball, that putting in somebody else will not hurt us that much. And also, too, again, in practice, having the ability to have that competition within positions.
Our next question comes from Daryl from Maconia, who asks, there's a lot of talk about this guy from LSU being able to go to the NFL already as a freshman. Do you think players are ready to play professional football at such a young age?
I think there's certain people that are, but I think there's also, too, there's a physical maturity and then there's also a mental maturity, too, as well. And taking a look at it, I think those 3 years help them so that you have a higher percentage of success when they're in the professional ranks. And so, I like the idea of having that 3 years of either a redshirt plus 2 or 3 full years of playing before they come into it. For a lot of positions, it's a physical thing. But more so, it's just that concept of being able to start to figure out life a little bit, because otherwise you go 1 year and all of a sudden you've seen this already where you have a ton of money and a lot of time and all this on your hands, and I think that leads to to more people falling out early and having struggles rather than being able to have continued success because of the development that they've had before they make it to the professional ranks.
I think people neglect the fact, too, that you're talking about a 19-year-old guy facing somebody 35 and 36 years old. That's a big difference.
Yeah,
So.
and we always talk about, too, I mean, we deal with 18 to 22-year-old guys here in that case, and sometimes we have to remind ourselves that they're still figuring things out. It's the same thing here. Those guys, just because they're physically able to do stuff, they're still figuring out life.
Absolutely. Our next question comes from Henry from Kelowna, who asks, Coach, did you see that play at the end of the Michigan State game? You have to feel bad for the poor punter. I also see that all these people are saying they would not have punted, but that is the right play, isn't it?
Yeah, you know what? Coach Hayes brought it up on the bus on the way home and said that that's what happened. I saw the highlight later on. In fact, watching on Big Ten Network, kind of the quick replay of it, just because I wanted to see what the scenario was, and kind of that same concept of what I would do in that same situation. With 11 seconds, and you're in that position, that's a tough one too. You know, I thought about, hey, what could you do? Could you do a rollout pass where you're able to throw a go route? You know, because essentially the clock doesn't stop until the ball hits the ground. Would that take 11 seconds? Thinking through all of those types of things going into it, and what would you do? You'd like to hope that you're at a Division I school, you can just one-step punt the thing and get it off. We had that same scenario last year when we played Morris here, and it was probably more about 45 seconds left where we were on our own, we had 4th and 1 on our own, about 40. And the thought was, it went through my head, okay, if we get this punt off, we're fine. It's done. It's over with. They don't have any timeouts left in doing it. So my thoughts were, percentage-wise, that gives us the best chance to be able to have success in doing it. And I think in this case, that's the same thing. Coaching move, I think you have to do that. You know, how many times have you punted where you've got the punt off? You know, and in that situation, I thought they did the right thing.
I feel bad for the punter, too, because this poor kid,
Yep.
you know, they're just brutalizing this guy.
Yep, again, comes back to probably an 18 to 22-year-old kid who, you know, 99 times out of 100 has been fine doing it, but has that tough situation coming, and now he's got to live with it for a long period of time.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yep.
Luke from Minneapolis asks, what do you think is behind the play that the Colts tried against the Patriots? Or what do you think is behind that? Have you ever designed a crazy play like that before, and did it work?
Yeah, I think one, you know, I listened to this on the radio on my way home from work last night. I think the biggest concept in it was had a different player than what you've practiced all week. So I think their snapper or the guy or holder or whatever was a different guy that they had previously that they had practiced all week because the other guy got hurt. I think anytime you're doing those types of situations, it's tough to do a fake where you haven't had somebody who's practiced it all week. And I think that part of it would be something that I would look at and say, it's probably not what we want to do. But you know, we've had pretty good success. I wish I did it more. You know, we always talk about the idea of, you know, fake punts. The percentage of fake punts making it are pretty high. Well, how come we don't do it more? Well, part of it is you got to have the mindset of probably the best chance to do it is in your own half of the field. Well, are you willing to give it up in your half of the field is doing it? And so from that perspective, I think those are the key situations inside of it. I know we've done some onside kick to start a game off and things like that kind of dictated that. And I think a lot of times we've done those with teams that are kind of perceived to be maybe a little bit above us to give us an extra possession, that type of thing, from doing it. And so again, in this situation, I don't know what part of the game it was. I wasn't watching it during that time, but if you're doing a fake, you got to make sure that you've practiced it the previous week and everybody's on board for understanding what should happen when you do it.
That makes perfect sense. Chris from Eden Prairie asks, why do you think that people believe linemen are so dumb? They probably have to know more about the offense than anybody else on the field but the quarterback, and have to make adjustments more than anyone else. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and that's the position that I coach, and a lot of people don't. Everybody always thinks that Coach Saylor always telling me all offensive linemen have to do is just have to step punch. Okay, well, there's more to that because you not only have the variables of multiple plays that you run, but you also have to change that up according to what defense you have against you. And so, you take a look at each time and us going through, on cones or drawing up on a board, those guys have to be pretty smart individuals because we make them know not only their position, but what all five guys are doing. That way they understand the concept of each play. And that way when people blitz or different adjustments that are made, we understand why do we adjust the way that we do, why do we change it up, so that way they understand the framework of each play. And I agree with you. I think Offensive lineman, probably one of the more cerebral positions, but it's perceived to be because it's big guys just trying to move other guys that it's not a real smart position, but it is.
Absolutely. Janie would like to know, watching the game, I saw a player smashing his bat against a water cooler. This seems to happen all the time where a player will throw stuff and tear up the dugout or throw stuff onto the field. Is this extreme competitiveness or just childishness?
We've had in the past, or we've had some different situations where a young man might hit a water jug or kick over a number. To me, that's not the way I want to see you display frustration, because in sports, gives you a chance to work on some things that you're eventually going to have with your family and in your job and things like that. And so when things go wrong, how are you going to deal with them? And we've had these conversations about somebody comes up and cheap shots you, let him take the 15 and come back the next time and smack him in the mouth in the regular order of play and do it that way from that. And so hopefully in time, we're teaching guys that that's not a way that we want to be acting. There's other ways that you can let out your competitiveness in the right way from doing it, and it doesn't reflect poorly upon the team or yourself as an individual as well.
That makes sense. Kyle from Marconi would like to ask, it was Back to the Future Day on Wednesday. If you could go back in time, what would you change?
I heard that again, that yesterday was the date that was on Back to the Future. And I talk about this with guys. It's part of the reason why I took the job that I have, is I look back on my college life and think, I wish I had done things differently. I wish I had used better judgment and done better things from that perspective in doing it. And I can't do that, but what I can do is I can help our guys to make the right decisions and do it inside of that. And so, given a choice, if I could go back and change something, that's probably the biggest thing that I would change, would be, just a chance to do those things, knowing what I know now, having the faith and the beliefs that I do right now, going back and thinking of how I would do things differently and how I would impact others differently as well.
That's great. Our last question comes from Dean from Buffalo, who wonders, Coach, there's a lot of excitement about the new Star Wars movie coming out. What was your favorite Star Wars movie?
Probably doesn't have anything to do with the movie itself. I enjoyed those as a kid, but when I forgot what age, my dad took me to the first Star Wars. I didn't know what it was and went to it and loved it. I think part of it was just being able to be with my dad and go to that and spend some time and going to watch it. And so I think he took me to one of the theaters that had the Dolby sound back then and that type of thing from it. And so, I thought that was a pretty cool thing and a reminder of that being a connection with my dad. But I always enjoyed Star Wars movies, and I heard some guys in the office today talking about the movies, and there's certain guys that say, yeah, I watched every one of them, and other guys say, I don't know if I've seen one. So it's kind of different in this generation on which avenue they've taken.
Interesting. Well, thank you, Coach, for joining us this week.
Thank you.
We want to thank Coach Auer for joining us on Auer Time this week. If you have your own questions you'd like to ask the Crown College coach, please send them to us at johnauer@minorleaguesportsreport.com. That's John Auer at minorleaguesportsreport.com. Please have your questions to us by Wednesday at noon so we can give the coach a little bit of time to review those questions before we record our show on Thursday morning. We want to thank you for joining us this week. I'm Rob Paneer, the managing editor of the Minor League Sports Report, and we want to remind you that every Friday morning, it's Auer Time.